Okay, so today I'm going to talk about who am I and my connection within our territory. I'm speaking from my own experience, so building connections to the land, culture, and community in an Indigenous perspective. And I own my own stories, and some of the stories that I'm going to share, I will make mention on who those stories came from. So, a little bit about myself. Charmayne Nikal. I do belong to the Gitimt'en clan, like Iris said. And my father, Chris Gagnon, he is my Indigenous roots. My mother, Judy Gagnon, she's my German descent. And I do identify more with my Indigenous heritage than I do with my German, only because there was no connection there with my grandfather with his community. So we all identify as Canadians and with our Indigenous side. So I'd like to start with a story before I move on to anything else. And I grew up on the Wit'suwit'en territories close to Houston, BC, way up in the bush. We had no running water, no electricity, and I do believe that is has a lot to do with my connections and who I am today. It was so embedded into who I am. And I'm going to share one story. And, the outdoors was a playground. It was my playground. And there was one night I went out hunting with my father. I do notice a few of you on this Zoom that may have heard this story already. So it got late. My father had shot a moose, hata we call it. And we were trucking along. I was quite young, probably 6 or 7 years old. And it got late and this moose was on a toboggan. I couldn't walk anymore. I was crying. It was cold. I wasn't happy anymore. Couldn't figure out why he made me go out so late with him. And so he put me up on his shoulders and we trucked along for a few more kilometers, and he was getting tired and he couldn't do that anymore either. So he put me inside the moose, and the moose was still warm. And I was crying and scared. It was dark. And finally I could hear the dog barking in the distance, which was my dog. So I knew we were getting closer to home. So we made it home. But I remember after a few minutes, I wasn't scared anymore, and I definitely wasn't cold. I was very warm. So I think back to that. Experience, and upon sharing this with other people, it's at first that, what, your father put you inside a dead moose. But for me now, I think about that, and it was just something normal. He was protecting me. It was a source from the land. It was keeping us safe. So all of these were life teachings and learnings. So I wanted to open up in a good way myself and share that story as well. So thank you. So a little bit of today. And one thing I was going to ask for you guys to think about was think about your being and the connection to the land. And feel free to answer that throughout the presentation or put it in the chat, or I know we can have time at the end of the presentation as well. So a lot of who I am today is through experience, as well as my education. Most of my experience is through people I meet, and those relationships. Relationships are really big for me. So I'm going to talk about a little bit more of who I am, purpose and intention. And I'm not sure if she's on today, but I'm going to do a shout out to Leona Antoine. I've had the privilege of meeting her through the First Nations Pedagogy Network. And we talked a lot about purpose and intention, and that came from her. So I wanted to make mention to that. Building connections to land and community, land as a teacher, and then moving beyond best practice. So a little bit of who I am. And like I said earlier, I own my own stories, and I'm going to dive into a little bit of what shaped me. So throughout the presentation, you'll get that at the end of it, how things go full circle. And I am a firm believer in Indigenous story work. Many of you with UBC are probably very familiar with Joanne Archibald, so I will make mention to her a few times throughout this presentation, as it's fundamental to having a deeper connection within community, and it's the root of my being and my lived experiences. And this is the picture of my Annie Gagnon and Louis Gagnon. Those are my grandparents, my father's parents. And this is my beautiful niece Dale, and she's holding a quite large of an eagle feather. So, and together we are stronger through our way of life, and each of us have been gifted knowledge. So I'd like to dive into another bit of a story here. In the background there, you can see some rocks and there's a tree line. We were out at the Pacific Ocean. My biological mother had passed away, and her last wishes were to be placed in a good way in the Pacific Ocean. So the closest ocean to us is in Prince Rupert. So we went out there one weekend, gathered all of our family together, and we went out there. And it rained all weekend. It just poured rain. And every time the tide went out in the distance, there was this rock that would appear. And it was a huge rock in a little bit of a landing. And the tide would come in, it would disappear, and the tide would go out. So finally on Sunday, my brother said, you know, Charmayne, we need to just get this done, or should we go home? Should we just wait? The weather was not very good. It wasn't cooperating. And we agreed to just, okay, well, let's see what, let's get in the boat. Let's just go. So lo and behold, we got in the boat. We were about halfway over to that rock that kept appearing, and the rain stopped. The sun came out, and my little niece Dale here was very eager. She didn't quite know what was going on. She was very young. We explained to her and talked to her about the process of what we were going to do in the little ceremony we were doing. But so as eager as she was, and children experiencing the land, she climbed up on top of this rock very quickly, and that feather she found at the top of it. And there was a big eagle up there, and the eagle went flying. And that tree line you see in the photo, the eagle sat on that tree line and watched us for the entire ceremony that we did for our mother. So when we were done, got back in the boat, and the eagle flew away. Dale still had the feather, and we were going back over to the shore. It was about, I don't even know how many yards away. It wasn't too far from the shoreline, and I had talked to her that feathers are sacred to us and our people, and she wanted to play with it. You can see in the photo, it was starting to get a bit tattered and coming apart. And so she gave it to me. I said, one day, Dale, this feather it will come back to you. I said, but right now, Auntie's going to hold on to it. And it meant a lot for my brother and I. So fast forward 5 years, my brother graduated law school, and I gifted him that feather back, and it was used as a tassel on his grad hat at TRU. He did a doctorate degree. And nobody else in my family knew that that feather was coming out with him that day. And it turns out it was the exact same day, 5 years later, that Dale had found that feather. So that feeling of warmth. And so when I say each of us has been gifted knowledge, when I think back about how stories are so embedded in us and how they become us, this story speaks to that for myself and my family as a way of that. So Dale got pretty excited, and she's like, oh, that's that feather I found. And I said, yes. And remember, I told you it was going to come back to you. So it now belongs to your dad. And when the time is right, your dad will give that feather to you. So that was a happy ending to that story. I just thought I would share that. Yeah. So if anybody has any questions or anything, please feel free to hop on in, or comments. So, and Helen, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. And Helen spoke about the summertime at the smokehouse. So for this slide, I chose this is my son, Damien. And this was probably about the 30th fish that he had cut that day. But at first he was, we came here to the smokehouse, and he was so eager. He just wanted to get down to business, as kids do. And he didn't do it properly, so that privilege was taken away from him by his Auntie Gloria, Helen's sister. Says no, he can't do it until he knows how to do it properly, and so he understood that. But at first, he his intention was to, I know how to do it, I want to get in there. So it wasn't until the end of we were there for about 10 days. It wasn't until about the 8th day that he was able to start cleaning fish again. So when I talk about purpose and intention, and, and where does this fit in for the early years? We really have to know, for myself, I really need to know where I come from and what I'm doing. There's a reason for everything that we do. So knowing where I come from, knowing where you come from is really vital in this field. And why do we do the things we do? What do we carry with us? What knowledge have we brought our way? Maybe when we were younger, elders share many stories with us, didn't quite get it at the time. But as you get older, I know for myself, it's like, that's why I do that. My grandmother may have done that, or my father may have done that. And it's such a huge part of who I am as an educator as well. And I talk a lot about, for us, it's a way of life. And it's, being very fortunate to have experiences on the land, whether it's preserving our food or out hunting or just outside playing with the children. We want to be able to have this seamless experience. So that's why I have seamless there beside. It's a way of life. For me, it's to be able to live it and feel it. It just feels so seamless all the time. And my auntie, Antoinette, and I know Iris kind of touched a little bit on this. So I was smiling as you were talking about the field of early education. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? And I had gotten in trouble as a young girl. I'm sure we've all had those eventful moments. And she used to share with me, she was, Charmayne, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? And I thought, oh, I'm 16 years old. I have no idea yet. And I didn't, not until, I'm well in my 40s now, and it's come full circle. So I'm sure we all have those kind of stories, not quite knowing. And then moving on to a stronger connection with story work. Joanne and Ellen White. I've had the privilege of meeting Ellen White way back in 1994. And I had no idea that in my lifetime I was going to come across Ellen again and Joanne until I read this wonderful book, Indigenous Story Work. And it's a foundation that I'm very fond of now. I've taken to Indigenous story work. There's so much embedded. It just really brings life alive for me in the field, outside my work and inside my work. Another thing is, the kinship that we have with plants, animals, fish. And you can see in this photo here, and what I explained earlier, how eager Damien was to be able to go, I can do it, I can do it, I can cut the fish. He really had to develop that kinship with what he was doing and the responsibility that comes with it. We all hold a responsibility. So it was a very interesting process for him that week. And part of my organization that I work with in community is the Kaiwiget Education Society, and I manage our Head Start program. We've all come together, and our mission statement is Wit'suwit'en values empower lifelong learners. Sorry, there should be an S on there. And that's part of really empowering who we are as in Wit'suwit'en individuals. So a little bit about this video. We have a young fella in community, and after the news of the residential school children, the unmarked graves in Kamloops, Wit'suwit'en territory, we had a ceremony in our community. So this individual had collaborated and had he puts them on our YouTube channel for our community, and it's titled We Are Wit'suwit'en. So talking about purpose and intention, I thought this was a really nice video to share with you guys. So it's 3 minutes long. Enjoy.
Hadi, Gina Tonju, Gin Witset, Kayahanet at me. That's all the time. That's Yinka Honzu, one of clan.
El regalo más grande que tiene Disney.
Thank you for sharing that. So that video was just done recently, and the ceremony that took place was a brushing ceremony for, we have a lot of individuals in our community who had gone through residential school as well as the Indian day schools. And there was a lot of children. We had that window where we could meet when the regulations were lifted, and we met outside at our local campground. It was a really powerful day, and to see all the children just being themselves and everybody just coming together after not being able to gather in our community for so long, not being able to follow through with our responsibilities of our traditional system was really hard on our community. We're very strong in that area. We have our cultural ceremonies, our batlatches. So that video is just a little smidgen of what we do, and that was all in one day. So thank you.
Charmayne, Aria has a question for you in the chat. She says, could you please talk about the animals at the end of the video?
The animals at the end of the video.
The ones that appear in the image, like the.
Okay, yes, thank you, Aria. It's so nice to hear your voice, Aria. I've missed
Yes.
you. So I'll go back to the slide there. So the images, those represent our 5 clans in community. So our traditional system. So the second one over. So this first one here, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Lixiliu?
Lixiliu, yeah.
Yeah, so Lixiliu, small frog. And the one over to it here, the cursor's on there, that is Tsayu. So Helen belongs to the Tsayu clan. That's the beaver clan.
Yeah.
And I can't quite see the third one.
Gitimt'en.
Gitimt'en, so that's me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Gesahiu.
Gitimt'en, yeah.
And then Lixamisiu.
Lixamisiu, yeah. The owl clan.
And Lixamisiu is my father's clan. So how our clan system works, and even with in our community, we have a delegated child welfare agency, and so it's all driven by community and grassroots. So if something were to ever go wrong or I need help, I reach out to my father clan, which is Lixamisiu, and they are there to wrap around me and support me in any way possible. So we're very strong in our clan systems. Thank you. Thanks for that question, Aria.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that brings me to this one, building connections to the land. And up to the right side here, our values and beliefs. And it's, I think about that a lot now that I'm in my older years, I'm getting up there. What do I hold true to? And when I think about that and I bring it into our facility and anywhere I work with BCACs as well, I often think about that and what holds true to me and what are my values and beliefs, and do we share similarities? Many of us do share similarities, and to really enhance that and elaborate on that, and within building that relationship, on the left side here on my slide, develop a great relationship with your coworkers. Trust and belonging is everything in a center. And we need that before we can even start being guided by the children. We need to develop that relationship with the children as well. And just allowing yourself to be led by your surroundings inside and outside. And when I say inside, there's times where programs may not be in communities or in Indigenous communities. You may be right in Vancouver. And what can you bring inside your facility to have that connection to the land around you and to really have it embedded into your programs? Do you know the names of the mountains that are surrounding Vancouver or surrounding the area that you're in. For myself, we're in the valley, the Bulkley Valley, and to know the stories behind those mountains and, you know, the roads, the names of the creeks, everything has a name. So when we start building those connections to our surroundings, naming those are super important, and it allows yourself to be led by that. So being led by the children, but you're also being led by your responsibilities that you have being connected to the land. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Hi, Charmayne. There are no questions, but there is a really nice comment. Fatima, she wrote it to you. She said that she gained a deeper understanding and truly felt the idea of having a relationship of reciprocity and respect to land when she came to Canada, and she got it from her Indigenous friends and instructors introducing it to her, the concept. It is one of the most precious, life-changing concepts I've ever learned, and is going to stay with me for the rest of my life. The kinship with nature and all living things, building connections to land, generosity, hope, and strength in the face of hardship and injustice and endless other lessons. Thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah. And I feel that as well. Like, it's once you get it, it's there and it does stay with you. And it's, you know, it's a great feeling. So thank you for sharing. Yeah. So that speaks to people that have experienced that any of us, you know, learn to make self-understanding of story work a priority. And I say story work because obviously of Joanne Archibald's work. And it's, she talks a lot about educating the heart, the mind, and the spirit, and the body. And it's really having that self-understanding. And once you get it, you get it. And it's such a powerful feeling. Yeah. So when I think about building connections to, you know, it's really taking a bird's eye view of yourself. It is essential, not just for you, but for your program, and taking a step back and really looking at programs in the field of education and what we bring. And your lived experience is an integrated part of who you are today. So for myself, it has shaped the educator who I am today. In doing so, whether I was working in the Okanagan, I lived there for 8 years, or I was living back home, you know, even living back home in my own community, we think, you know, we know everybody, but it's like, do you really know your families? You know, when I say that, it's, do you know what they're going through? Do you know, we don't need to know them intimately where we know their deepest secrets. I don't mean that, but I do mean, like, do we really know our families enough to know what they're bringing to our center and what they're going through? So I found that once we get to understand our families a bit more and build that relationship, we then have that solid connection. And it really empowers who we are as educators to be able to look at that child as a gift, and, you know, anything that they bring to us is a gift. And as Helen mentioned at the beginning, I will add, we haven't done our honor song for a little while, only because we've had so many passings in our community. And one of our traditional protocols is to do no drumming when there is a significant other who has passed away. So Helen has recently lost many family members. So she has put her drum down for a while. And to honor that, our center has also put our drum down. And we explain that to the children so that they have that connection. So I thought I would add that. But previously to that, we were thanking the children for coming to our center every day, you know, thanking them for allowing us to teach them for the day. We would start our morning, each morning at 9 o'clock, and the elders and the staff would sing, as we learned it, we would sing that song. And the children, we didn't explain a lot to them about it at first. And as each day went by, you know, parents started showing up on time without us telling them, you know, well, you should come at this time. We no longer had to do that. Things just organically started happening. It was like, oh, they didn't want their children to miss out on that song. And it became such a wonderful place to be. And, you know, the children connecting with our elders as well and sharing the stories. So I just wanted to add that. I actually wasn't going to talk about that, but Helen mentioned it, so I thought I'd throw that in there. And land is a teacher. This little girl, her name is Ariel. She's probably one of my favorite little human beings. She is a child at our center. So I'll just read the quote here. There'll be a story for every season that embeds your culture, no matter your location. When you listen, there is so much to learn from the way we walk and talk, the doing and the living. Allow space for curiosity and be comfortable being uncomfortable. And you can tell by the smile on this little girl's face, her dad, herself, her brother, her mom and dad were out that morning, and they had gotten a buck, so a nelto, a deer, and they had from start to finish. And she just gets right in there, you know, feeling it, touching it, cutting it. She knows everything at the age of 4, what to do. So her dad decided, hey, Charmayne, do you want a deer? It's like, okay. Are you ready? It's like, sure. So not much warning, and he came and dropped off a bunch of deer meat and put it on our table at the daycare, and away we went. So, and when I talk about the land as a teacher, I often hear our elders speak of timing, you know, and I know there's a lot of jokes that go around about Indian time and things like that, but for us, it means it's our time. Things are done on our time and things don't wait. So take, for example, this hunt. It was done on their time, and it then became our time because he had asked, you know, I know it's not in your schedule today, but here it is. So the children got to experience all of that, from cutting to grounding to eating it. We now have all the deer meat in our freezer at the daycare. It's eaten quite often. The children get to, you know, they now have a story behind that and where it came from. Another thing is, when I talk about there's a story for every season, is we have stories for berry picking. You know, there's a time of the year where berries are ripe, and time of day or time of year when we can only hunt certain animals. And another story I have too is, you know, with our river that runs right through our community, it's our Wit'suwit'en, our canyon. I'm always told the tips of the mountain, there's one mountain close to our community when the snow is gone, not all the way gone, but when there's no more snow on that one tip of the mountain, the fish will start running. And every single year I time it, and it's always within a day or two. And this year our fish were late running in our community. And that's when we did our fish camp with Helen and Gloria at the smokehouse. When they came, they came. So we were cutting, you know, we've probably seen over 200 fish, 200 to 250 salmon go through that smokehouse in a 10-day period, because when the fish were ready, they came. And there's no waiting. We could not say, you know, let's wait a week, let's wait a day. We had to drop what we were doing and do it right then and there. So that's where a lot of the stories behind Indian time came from. It's on our time. Is there any questions about that? Or Helen, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, you're talking about Ariel. She is like learning really fast on how to hunt and how to preserve with her parents. And one day she came back and she patted me on the shoulder and she said, "Guess what?" I said, "What's wrong with you now?" And she said, "Oh, my dad got another hada, but it's not hada. What is it?" I said, she said, "It's an elk." And then like right away I thought of her saying, she's saying the difference with elk and the hada, moose and elk. And I said, "Oh, my girl, you're so smart," I said to her, and she smiled, but I'm not allowed to talk about it here. She says to me and said, "No, you can tell your little students there." And she was telling one of her friends what hada was and what the elk was. And she's always helping us at the school learning. If she's not learning the language, she always makes sure that she asks us if we know what word to say. So I want to thank Charmayne for having her on the picture. Thank you, Masai.
Yeah. And I seen somebody, little window popped up, somebody had their hand up.
Claudia, go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Charmayne. Nice to meet you.
You as well.
It's Claudia, and I'm a UBC student. Iris is my teacher. And I have a question for you. When you share your story at the beginning, it was beautiful. I really loved it. And for me, feather, since I moved to Canada, has been something very important to me. And I didn't know why, because I never had those connection in my hometown, for example. And and so I've been very interested in about the word spirit and how the First Nations at the British Columbia Early Learning Framework, how we as teachers, we can teach how the spirit is, how you can embody that experience. And for me, and the story that you shared, that the feather and all the time that passed between the first experience and then when your brother was graduated, it was like the spirit. For me, that is something that reflects the word spirit. But I'm not sure how we can guide somehow those experiences, because they are so organic, what happened to your niece, and there's something that is not, we cannot frame in a curriculum or something. So how we can trespass or given the space in the classroom or in our role as teachers or mothers or partner or parents, and give the children these opportunities to really feel in their bodies, in the experience alive, what spirit means.
Thank you for that. So as I hear you speak and I think about that, and sometimes I know for our center, some people call it, the seat of your pants, and, well, if it's not written down, what are we supposed to do today? And it's really just going beyond best practice. And, the things that happen so organically is just to let it happen. Say, for example, you were out on a walk and one of the children's found a feather or an eagle feather. I feel as though, that was meant to happen, and you would take that opportunity to possibly share how sacred an eagle feather is, or even get into the different, you know, what feather that is, where did it come from. Ravens are very significant in Indigenous cultures as well, and owls. So there's, and I don't have a lot of those stories. They're not mine to share. But I think to really just be patient with the process, and sometimes you may experience something and it may take a couple of years or a couple of months to come back to that and experience it again, but to really just embrace that and hang on to that. For me and my culture and who I am, like some of these experiences, I don't know either. And sometimes we're just going to have to be comfortable not knowing. And it does come back to you eventually. I do have another story about a feather too that was just surfaced as you were talking. It kept coming back. I'd lived in the Okanagan area for a long time, and my husband was really close to a lot of his friends out in West Bank. And one of his friends had gifted him a feather. And so it was like 10 years later, he had come back to our community for the first time ever from the Okanagan for our wedding. And he's seen the feather. He's like, wow, Conrad, you still have that feather. And we finally heard the story behind that feather, and it took 10 years. I can't share it today. It's not mine to share. It's my husband's. But so that's a little bit of, you know, how letting things happen organically, and, you know, the spirit of the feather. So I hope that helps. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So moving on a little bit too, and I put think Indigenous here because coming from an Indigenous lens, any of us can do it. We just sometimes need a little bit more prompting. So I've chosen 4 photos here. 2 are mine, the 2 are not. I found them on the internet. So the one on the left-hand side here is preparing in a good way. So going back to a lot of these experiences are my lived experiences. And so this is the same smokehouse that Helen and I were referring to. So the one on the left-hand side with all the salmon hanging, they were on a great big long pole. So we get 10 of them to a pole. And of course, my son, being the eventful Damien he starts slapping all the fish as they were walking by him. And I caught it immediately. And I was like, you know, you got to sit down for a little while. And he's like, but I didn't do anything wrong. I said, well, no, you didn't, not in your eyes. I said, but I said, you can continue to do that, but this is what I was taught growing up. And I said, you're mocking the fish, you're slapping them, you know? And I said, in order for us to be healthy and preserve our food and prepare it in a good way, we need to be very respectful. So you're going to be here, it comes with a full responsibility, and that responsibility is to not fool around with the fish. So he kind of got it. And then we were at home that night. We all ate very late those days being at the smokehouse. So it was like 10 o'clock at night, and I was cooking in the kitchen. And he's like, so is that just like if you're really mad and you're cooking? And I said, yeah, so that's probably the days we eat out, Damien. So it turned into a little joke. But I found it very interesting that he asked that later on. You know, preparing our food in a good way is really vital to who we are. And I think that can go in any culture. You know, if we're preparing our food in a good way, we're going to live a long time. We're going to feel good. We're going to do good. And so this other photo here to the far right, we learn by watching and doing. I don't know what I was trying to say there. I think there's a typo. We learn by watching and doing with our elders is what that should have said. So Gloria and Helen can attest to this, is I got fired on my first fish, and 40 years old, been around it my entire life, thought I was going to be able to just dive right in and do our bet strips. She told me I was butchering the fish, just like my son got cut off from cleaning the fish at the beginning because he wasn't doing it right. And Damien thought that was quite funny. He's like, "Oh, Mom," he's like, "you got in trouble." I said, "Yes, I did. I got in trouble." And she wouldn't let me cut the fish all week. And then finally on the last day of doing fish, I graduated up and I was able to cut a fish. So, but I had to sit there just as along with my 12-year-old boy, and I had to learn as well. And it's quite a unique process. It's an art. She does a salmon in 2 minutes, where poses it took me 10 minutes. So, our elders are very, very skilled. And the other two photos in here, every living thing has a story and a connection. And, throughout the presentation today, you'll notice that I go into a lot of stories, and a lot of our stories all have a connection with every living thing, non-living thing. And naming things gives a deeper connection. So the picture here of the river, that runs right through our community. That's our canyon, that's our lifeline. That's where we do all of our fishing, a lot of gaffing, dip netting, and having those connections to the Wit'suwit'en is very powerful, rather than just, there's a river. It's really important to be able to name things and know your surroundings, no matter where you are, in the city or in a urban area. Any questions or comments? So this brings me right back to best practice, and in the early childhood field, we seem to have, there's the educator, in which we bring, and then there's our programming. So to be able to have that balance between all of them, I've read the BC Early Learning Framework multiple times, and there's so much in there that you could embed any culture, and to really bring that alive. Just stepping out beyond the textbook a little bit though too, and really enhancing your lived experiences is one of the recommendations I can give, is being your best self, even on your tough days. And what I mean by that is, being in the field is very stressful sometimes. There's shortages, there's longer hours, there's always changes with, there's a lot going on with government right now, and to always just be your best self, no matter what it is. At the end of the day, I remember being told one time by an elder in the Wit'suwit'en area, the Enderby, Mary Thomas, and she guided me along a lot in the Okanagan area, and she's another person that I'm very fond of. Speaking of curriculum and what she had taught me, but I was having a really tough day one day, and I called her, and I was going to cancel going out there for a visit, and she says, "Oh, you know what, my dear, you better just come out anyways." I was like, "Oh, okay, not really." But she told me, she's like, "You put on your best self every day. And although it was a rough day, you leave that at home. If you're still feeling that same way," she's like, "on your, you get home, you walk through your house door." She's like, "You go and have a shower and you get changed, and that's the start of your new day." And so I started doing that once in a while. And what a life-changing experience that was. It was, having 2 days in one day and starting a new day as soon as I got home. So that was really good advice that she had given me. And I'm really grateful that I still chose to go out there on that day, because I had heard a lot of valuable stories and feedback from her. I seen somebody else has a hand up.
Hi, yeah, there's a comment in the chat, or a question, excuse me, which is from iPaul, and they ask, could you please explain more about which stories to share with others? As a non-Indigenous educator, they're struggling to find a boundary.
Sure. So for myself, my rule is if I've been gifted their time, and I usually ask, hey, do you mind if I share that story, with so-and-so? Or so for myself right now, these stories I'm sharing with you about the feather, that's my story to share. But say, for example, I'm going to gift you the time to share that story with somebody else, which I am going to give you the blessing for that. So that story you can share with others as an example of, I lost my train of thought, sorry. But there is some stories, and Helen can speak on this on my behalf for me. There's some stories that I personally will hear, but I can't share. If I don't have permission to share them, if they're well-known stories out in the public, on the internet, things like that, rule of thumb is most of the time you are able to share those stories. But my recommendation would to make sure that they're authentic. Where are the stories coming from? Is it somebody that is sharing a story from somebody else and it may have changed? So to always be sure that you have the source and permission. Even being in a non-Indigenous communities, there's always elders. There's local elders that have been around for many years, non-Indigenous, and they have a lot of stories about the territories and the areas that you're on, legends, different kinds of stories, so that would be my recommendation. One story I don't mind you guys sharing is, another one is the stories of my son and those, preparing food in a good way. Those are stories that have been passed down to me and sharings from my elders. And that kind of knowledge I've been told, it's really important to share that kind of stuff with other people. Everything that, we're given is a gift, and to be able to share some of that. You'll know when it's a sacred story, and it's probably stories that, you may hear for the first time. And those ones you definitely want to try to get permission for, if that answers your question. Helen, did you want to add to that?
Which one is that, Charmayne?
Oh, she was just asking, to be able, what stories to share and how to go about being able to share information for non-Indigenous educators, and when to share them.
Okay, like the one with my sister doing the salmon. She always makes sure that everybody that's working with us during the summer, that they are prepared to learn, not to forget it. Like she was telling me, I'm glad I did this part, because if we're gone, who's going to teach them? That's what she said to me. And I was just thinking about it when the summer was over. We weren't doing any fish or any moose or anything like that. And one day she called me and she said, I hope all those ladies that we taught during the summer keep doing what they did with us, because that's how we learn. That's how our parents taught us, is when we went to the smokehouse, like you said, Charmayne, at the early age, and we come back really late, 10 or 11, we're done at nighttime. And that's been going on all summer with my sister and I. We finished by end of September with all the fish jarring. And over here too, we had to have a couple of young moms with us to help us preserve. And this is where the connection is with our elders and the youth and the little ones. They still talk about it at the school when we go to the daycare. The little ones ask, when we're going to go to the smokehouse? They call it pit house. When we're going to go to the pit house again, they ask me and said, not until summertime. So this is like, really have to listen to whoever is teaching you, the elders, or whoever's at your mentorship, you listen to them and then you teach it to your young people. So,
Yeah. So another thing I say too is, we don't always have the answers. I don't always have the answers. And for best practice for me is you'll know when the right time is to share those stories. There's no agenda most of the time for sharing those stories and the knowledge that's been passed down to you. And again, I can't stress that enough. Allow yourself to be led by your surroundings, no matter where you are. Take what you need and leave behind what you don't need. For example, throughout this morning, there's going to be some things that I've said that you guys will not remember, and that's okay. Or there's going to be some things that were of highlight to you, and take that with you. There's always got to be that give and take, set down, let it rest. And that's how we are with our food preparation as well. We only take what we need and no more. And also, I know Iris touched on this, and this is a huge, huge thing of my life, is being an educator is not just a 9-to-5 job, it's an investment. And what I say for an investment is something positive, right? We're always investing in ourselves and in our community, in our surroundings. And it's who you are, what do you bring to the field? Really hang on to that. So it's really, really important. And, talking a lot about we can't teach directly from a book. A lot of these experiences aren't from a book. I've got a couple of notes today. That's all I have. If I was reading straight from a piece of paper, I would have been stumbling all morning. So I had chosen to come and join you guys today and be the best I can, my best self today, and talk from the heart. So that's what I've been doing to be able to share my experiences with you. So, and moving beyond best practice, being in the field of early childhood education, we still have all of our policies that we need to follow. We have our guidelines. We have our community bylaws. In a lot of Indigenous communities, we have our governing body, which is our elected chief and council. Sometimes they make bylaws. There's multiple influences. You think of the world around you right now and the influences that we have on social media, and always trying to catch up with that latest trend, focus on academics, so to be able to find that balance. And I found for us to find that balance within our community and our program was to have those connections with our elders and our land. And it may have taken a couple of years, but everything flowed together. Our narrative was definitely different. It was written different now. We're doing things differently than we have a few years ago. And honestly, it was because of the different connections that we have with the land and the people, the places, living and non-living. So again, I talk about that full circle and, the childhood, think back to childhood, what we carry, how has it shaped us, our history. Indigenous peoples have shared history that is very traumatic, and it has shaped a lot of our being today. So being able to go back to a lot of the grassroots and really focusing on how the education system is changing now, it's moving towards a positive direction. Grooming for us, I have grooming as it starts the day we're born. For example, Helen Nikal, she holds a chief name. She would have been groomed for that chief name at a very young age by elders and other people in her community and her clan. So really having tradition at the forefront of our being. And it takes a village. When I talk about it takes a village, it's that that doesn't just mean our own immediate community. You know, in the world of early education, it takes all of us together, each and every one of us on this Zoom today. You know, that's what I mean about it takes a village in the context of early childhood education. Language and culture, in any culture, you can't have one or the other. They come hand in hand. You can't separate that. And again, family is huge. You know, I talk about our clan system and my father clan and my Gitimt'en clan. Everyone who sits in my Gitimt'en clan, whether I'm biologically related to them or not, are my family. And giving back, you know, that's that full cycle, that full circle. Sharing your knowledge is not a job, it's a way of life. And for me, I don't hang on to that. I share as much as I can. And thinking about your lived experiences in your surroundings and sharing your stories. The more we share our stories, you know, I always think, you know, changing somebody one story at a time. You know, what legacies do we leave behind in those stories? Any questions? I'm at the end now.
There are actually two questions. One is from Claudia, and she's asking how non-Indigenous educators can keep connections with elders when we don't belong to a particular community. That's the first question.
Oh, okay. From my experience, so for an example, I was not from the Okanagan area, but as soon as I started making a few phone calls, reaching out, telling them the field I'm in, they were very eager and very, very accepting to share information with me and teach me. So my recommendation would be to reach out to, say, for example, if you're in the Lower Mainland area or anywhere really, you could reach out to the BC Aboriginal Childcare Society. And there's elders that we know in probably every community that we could possibly connect you with. Also, if you're, you know, wanting to reach out to non-Indigenous elders, you could do that as well. There's a lot of organizations in Vancouver that could help support and guide you in that direction. You could ask the parents that you work with, colleagues. It would just be asking the question like, hey, do you have an elder in mind, or who could I contact for this? And there's a lot of people that that are willing to share and talk to you. Yeah, so. It would just be reaching out, asking for at first.
Yeah, and there's also another question. So the question is from Uria, and she's asking, could you share, if appropriate, how do you name a child in your culture?
I can't speak on this because I'm not sure. And Helen, can you speak on that? Well, I am sure, but I just don't want to get it wrong. So. Helen, when you're grooming and picking names for children in community, how does that take place?
I'll talk on behalf of my son, Cheyenne Stan Jr. When he was 13 or 14, the way they started grooming him is at a very young age. My parents asked me if they could groom him for our late brother that died. And so I said okay to them. I didn't know all this traditional stuff that they were doing to him, but it stuck to me when he was only about 6 years old when they started everything with their traditional, like hunting, trapping, and all that stuff. They used to take him out to the territory where they were teaching him how to hunt and trap and all that. And when he got back home, he was 13 years old when he got back home, and they started grooming him for his name. They told him, this is the name we're going to give you. And I had to take him to the feast hall, tell him how it's done and all that. And then when he got his name, they were doing the totem pole for my dad. And he was one of them he was the youngest one that was there. There was a picture taken, and I was looking at all the pictures, and my son was the only one that was the youngest one of all the chiefs that were there when my dad was putting the totem pole up. So that's how they were grooming him to get his name. After he got his name, he started attending feasts, helping us with moose, if we need moose at the feast hall for our people that come into the feast hall, or sometimes he saves the height for the people that need to do traditional stuff with the moccasin, things like that. So he's learning all that stuff on his own. And right to this day, he still has the name since he was 13. And it's very sacred that they go by the name of how the elders taught them. They don't buy the name or anything like that. They were groomed at a very young age. And I know, like, the elders that taught my sisters and I were only 7 sisters and only had 1 brother. Now we're down to 4. We still try to teach our young people and also our own kids of how important it is to groom a young person to get a name. So this is how I remember my parents and the elders grooming my son to get his name. I hope that answered your question, my dear.
Thank you, Helen. Oh, and my hockey player just walked in. One thing I would like to share too, so the last photo here is our center elders. There's a few of them that aren't in the picture here, but left to right is Gloria and Helen, their sisters, and Rita and Catherine. They speak the Wit'suwit'en language to the children every day at the daycare, and they've developed a really solid relationship. When one of the elders miss, the kids automatically say, where is Helen, or where is Gloria? That connection and that bond that they've developed is really sacred. And another thing is, we've just recently started a totem pole project in our community. I had gotten some grant money, so the pole is actually being carved right in the back of our daycare, right in the play area. And the carver comes in every day and has lunch with the kids, asks him questions about the pole. And the purpose behind the pole is we wanted the children to be so involved with it that they have a hand in it. You know, they're feeling it, they're touching it, they're seeing it every day. They're going to start helping carve it when they can, sand it when they can. The pieces that are coming off the pole, the bark, you know, they've each been able to take some of that home with them. They've been able to use it for other purposes in the center. And eventually we are getting a new center in our community, and that pole will be set up right in front of our new daycare. And the goal was to, you know, there's going to be those stories. These children are going to be sharing those stories for a lifetime, you know, and that's just a little bit extra of who we are and how we're trying really hard to develop that relationship with our land and the people around us. Awitsa, I am done today unless there's any more questions. That was the end of my presentation.